Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can I have the first slide then? Okay, my presentation is based on observations we have made, and I thought that Musa would be in the house to present on the new technologies, but I think the informed is not able to attend. So we would have liked him to speak on the new vaccines, and I speak on what evidence is required to modify the current CBPP control policy during disease outbreaks. Next, please. Okay, from some of us, there is a need, there is a view that we need to change the current CBPP control policy or strategy, because the current one of test and slaughter accompanied with vaccination and all biosecurity measures undertaken, especially the test and slaughter, is meat resistance by farmers when targeting CBPP control. Usually the test and slaughter follows screening using a field CFT and a laboratory CFT for selection of animals in CBPP suspect herds. But the screening currently is not carried out. I think the reagents are unavailable. And within that strategy, the use of antimicrobials is not recommended. And we think that's a challenge that we have to address. I have heard it said that vaccination versus use of antimicrobials. So we will discuss that. Next, please. Now, within the CBPP clinical or outbreaks, differential diagnosis in our situation, especially in Kenya and East Africa, is that it is usually confused with East Coast fever and hemorrhagic septicemia or pasteurellosis. So to make that diagnosis, like this is CBPP, one has to do the PM and usually followed by serology. Next, please. And in many cases, it's failure of treatment for those that leads to, and then the postmortem that leads to diagnosis. So by the time serology results are released, the disease has spread in the whole herd, and the recommendation for slaughter is resisted by farmers because there are no arrangements for salvage prices. So unlike Zambia, which has those arrangements, in our situation we don't, and our target here is control of CBPP. So farmers who resist antibiotic, use of antimicrobials, do not disclose outbreaks. So it has been said there is low reporting, but one of the reasons is that farmers do not want to report because they will be forced to take the animals to the slaughterhouse. Next, please. Now, use of drugs and experimental on-station conditions have shown promising results. From long ago, tylosin was used, and the challenge with its use was that when it follows vaccination, then the vaccination becomes ineffective. And including oxytetracyclines, I'm sorry about the spelling for NIAM. That is a paper. Those are publications which have been done, which exist on the use of oxytetracyclines, and the promising results under experimental conditions are used as a reason to recommend use of drugs in the field. But the policy does not allow the veterinary authorities to say they used drugs. So farmers usually are taking it in their own hands to treat. Next, please. So more recently, there have been studies with anafloxacin in Namibia, and which has been tried and is efficacious. Then within the recent times, we have used tulathromycin and gamithromycin on station, and these are said to be mycoplasmacidal, unlike the oxytetracycline and tylosin, which are bacteriostatic or mycoplasmastatic. Tulathromycin and nanofloxacin are bactericidal. So they should give us a different reaction or response to treatment compared to the bacteriostatic antibacterials. Next, please. Next. So both oxytetracyclines, the problem with the bacteriostatic antimicrobials is that there is a relapse in many cases after treatment. So in the work we did with Francois, we recommended that the farmers should sell animals following recovery, because we thought it's unethical to advise farmers not to do anything, and yet we know that the solution will not work. So in the next, that's why I brought up the title of what evidence do we need? Next, please. Mycin, it's assumed that they should clear the organism, and the efficacy trials that were carried out on station with metaphylaxis, where all the animals were treated, they showed that the efficacy is above 80% when all animals are treated at the same time. Next, please. Now, we know that, did we skip one? Can you go back a bit, one slide? Yes. What we know is that primary vaccination with the live T144 vaccine under on-station trials conferred between 30 and 60% protection. So that's why I asked our colleague, when we are talking about vaccine failure, are we talking about failure after the second vaccination or failure after one vaccination? And the subsequent vaccinations should raise the efficacy levels. In the previous study, in the report in the presentation by Charles, he mentioned Rwanda, who vaccinated 5 times and got sufficient good results, good efficacy, when using the same vaccines that we are saying have failed. So our argument is the failure may be because of using the results from one vaccination instead of a second vaccination, instead of considering a second vaccination as the basis for establishing efficacy. In the case of the study that we carried out, revaccination was only effective if carried out 3 months after the first one. And then the protection increased to over 80%. So if we do it every 6 months or every 3 months, then we get good results. And we consider that herd protected if it has had a second vaccination. In fact, I'm thinking about T1SR. I'm wondering who is still producing, whether we are still producing. But T1SR, because of the frequent repeated vaccinations, gave better results when used in the field. But the disadvantage was that the resources to carry out vaccinations every 6 months were not easily available. Next, please. So there are 3 ways in which farms are managing CBPP outbreaks, especially in Kenya. There are those who are doing nothing because they have been advised not to use drugs, and vaccines, when used or when not available, even when vaccines are used, they take effect long after. So the outcome is that they lose 50% of the hearts through death, and then they give up and sell the rest to salvage the values. And this is affecting CBPP outbreaks in areas where there was no disease before, in where the CBPP was not reported before. And the herds are very, very, very big. There are herds of 1,200, herds of 3,000. So we would like to advise that we treat and sell recovered animals post-recovery. That is, and so we are wondering how to go about this, or vaccinate the whole, and then vaccinate the whole herd. But if we move to the next level of questioning whether it is, from questioning whether it is antibiotics or vaccines, then we can move to the level where we are saying, how can we combine the two for us to have an effect, especially on closed herds? Next, please. Now, there is no recommendation on how to combine vaccines and drugs simultaneously, for now. And we find it unethical to recommend slaughter of 5,000 head of breeder cattle as a way of controlling the disease in a closed herd. And as experts, we would like to discuss the way forward. And what we are discussing, I thought Musa would be around to say now, using the new vaccines, we have developed a vaccine. It's not giving good efficacy. Efficacy is between 50 and 60%, but it is a subunit vaccine. So it has the advantage of differentiating between an infection and a vaccination reaction. So we are still working on that, but in the meantime, next slide, please. So, I see. In the meantime, I had left this, the work that we are carrying out. I had left it for Musa to explain. But we hope that we can have a field test using the new vaccine, the subunit vaccine. And two, we would like to see if we can carry out, what kind of trials would we carry out so that the initial use of antibiotics can help to control active infection in a herd as we vaccinate. Because according to Masiga, in the old days and Windsor, if you vaccinate and then treat, then that animal becomes a susceptible animal. Or if you give antibiotics to that animal, it becomes susceptible. So we have to discuss on how to combine, or if it's acceptable as a policy to treat, then we see how to treat. In this case, it's metaphylaxis, covering all the animals in a herd. And in a herd for ranchers, it's like 5,000 animals, 6,000 animals, or 3,000. But for a community, that would be challenging because we would have to decide what we mean by a herd and what kind of costs are involved. And I think Musa was planning something about that. So I can't speak for his behalf, but we are, if we move through the slides, the last one, for references, we have Muka, I think he is in the house. So we are using those results to try and see if we can design a study under field conditions. Next, please. Okay, so what we are planning is a combination of antibiotic treatment and vaccination in the control of CBPP. But we have not yet reached a stage where we can say, this is the recommendation that we can make. Thank you.